My name is Claire, and I am 32 years old, living in Chicago, where the wind coming off the lake has a way of shaping a person as much as the skyline does. For the past decade, my life has been defined by long days at the office of a consulting firm, the kind of place where everything is glass and steel and ambition. I am good at what I do, very good, and that has carried me forward into a role where my phone never really stops, and the light in my office window often burns far later than anyone else's. There is a certain rhythm to it, the early coffee, the meetings that pile up, the constant feeling that if you keep pushing just a little harder, you will get where you're going. I sometimes wonder if I already arrived somewhere and simply didn't notice. While the rest of the city slides into the evening, I am often still high above the streets, looking down at the headlights crawling through the snow or the rain and thinking how quiet it all feels from up here. There is a comfort in that solitude, but sometimes the silence grows heavy. I have two younger sisters, Jessica and Molly, both of them busy with families of their own. Jessica, 27, has two little boys who seem to be growing faster every time I see them. Molly, just 25, married her college boyfriend straight out of school and is now deep in the chaos of life with a toddler. They live in the suburbs, not far from our parents, and when I visit, it feels like stepping into a world I somehow skipped. Their lives are full of things like bake sales and birthday parties and weekend soccer games. Mine, on the other hand, is full of business travel, strategy sessions, and the constant pressure to perform. I do not resent them for their choices, and I know they don't really understand mine, but there is a gap between us that has been growing for years. Sometimes I think they see me as the one who chose the city instead of a home. And maybe, in a way, they are right. I chose work. I chose to keep moving forward even when the price was coming home to an empty apartment and eating dinner out of takeout containers on a desk covered in papers. It is not that I never wanted more. There are days when the office is quiet, when the meetings have ended, and the building hums with the low sound of the air conditioning, and I let myself think about what might have been if I had slowed down, if I had chosen differently. Maybe there would be a house, a yard, someone waiting for me when I come through the door. Maybe there would be the same kind of laughter I hear spilling out of my sister's houses when I stop by on a Sunday afternoon. But life has a way of moving forward whether you are ready or not. And so here I am, with a neat and ordered apartment, a view of the city, and a calendar that rarely has space for anything outside of work. I tell myself I am content most of the time. I tell myself I have built this life for a reason, and that reason must be enough. It started with a call on a gray Thursday morning when the air outside the office windows looked like it had been drawn in pencil. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a stack of client presentations, when my phone lit up with Jessica's name. She doesn't call me much during working hours, so I hesitated for a second before answering, already half prepared to hear that something was wrong. Her voice came through bright and rushed, the way it always does when she has an idea she's excited about. She said she had been talking with Molly and that Mom's 60th birthday was coming up in a couple of months, and they wanted to do something big. Not just a dinner or a surprise cake, but a full celebration, something that would really feel like a milestone. Before I could ask what they had in mind, she added that they wanted everyone to pitch in, both with money and with time, because it was going to take all of us to make it happen. I sat back in my chair, staring at the skyline while she rattled off plans, and for a moment I let myself smile, imagining the three of us together, like when we were younger. Then she told me how much they were asking for, and the number almost made me drop the pen I was holding. It wasn't small. It was more than I had spent on my last vacation, and I don't exactly take cheap vacations. But I didn't hesitate. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was that old habit of mine to always be the one who says yes. I opened my banking app and transferred the amount right there as she was talking, telling her not to worry about it, that I wanted Mom to have a birthday worth remembering. She sounded relieved and a little surprised that I didn't argue. And then she said something else, almost as an afterthought, though I should have paid more attention to it at the time. She told me to keep an entire week clear on my calendar around the celebration. Take time off, she said. Don't plan anything else. It's going to be special. I glanced at my packed schedule, at the meetings I would need to rearrange, but I heard myself agree anyway, telling her I would make it work. It felt good in a way to know I was included in something that felt like family. The rest of that day slipped away into deadlines and calls, and in the weeks that followed, the conversation became just another item in the long list of things in the back of my mind. Occasionally, when I saw their messages in the family chat, I wondered what they were planning with all that money. But when I asked, they always brushed me off with a, "You'll see." I let it go. Work swallowed my attention, as it always does, and the promise I had made to keep that week free stayed quietly marked in my calendar. I told myself it would be nice to step out of my normal routine for once, to spend a few days celebrating Mom and being with everyone else. At the time, it felt like I was finally being part of something instead of just standing at the edges. The dinner was at my parents' house, the same house we grew up in, where every surface seems to hold some memory of childhood. It was one of those evenings when the noise of family fills every corner. Dad retelling stories he's told 100 times, Mom fussing over everyone's plates, Molly trying to keep her little girl from crawling under the table, Jessica laughing about something her boys had done earlier that week. For a while, I let myself settle into it, smiling at the easy chaos. Then, between bites, Jessica started talking with this carefully casual tone that instantly caught my attention. She said everything was arranged for Mom's birthday, that after weeks of planning, they had finally put it all together. We were all going to Aspen Peak Resort in Colorado, a full week away in the mountains, skiing and celebrating. The table erupted with excitement, everyone talking over each other about the slopes and the cabins, Dad already imagining himself trying snowboarding for the first time. I sat there trying to picture it too, wondering if I still had time to buy some winter gear before we left. And then the words that came next changed everything. Jessica explained it like it was nothing at all, just a practical little detail. They needed someone to stay with the kids. Since the resort would be crowded and busy, they thought it would be better if I just stayed at the rental house with all 5 of them. The chatter at the table slowed until it went completely quiet, all of them looking at me like the idea made perfect sense. For a moment, I thought she was joking. I laughed a little, waiting for someone to join in. No one did. It sank in then. What they were really saying, I was supposed to spend the week watching Molly's toddler, Jessica's 2 boys, and the 2 kids from our cousins who were also coming along, 5 children under the age of 7, while everyone else went out to ski, to celebrate, to enjoy the vacation I had paid for. I tried to keep my voice calm, even though I could feel something sharp tightening in my chest. I told them I wanted to be with everyone, that I had taken time off from work to celebrate Mom just like they had. Molly sighed like I was being difficult. She said the mountains would be loud and crowded, and that I probably wouldn't even enjoy it. Jessica added softly that I didn't need a break the way they did, because I don't have kids or a husband, and this was their one chance to breathe. The words hit harder than I expected. All of them were looking at me with this mixture of expectation and mild impatience, as though the decision was already made, and I was just delaying things. I stared at my plate for a long moment, and then I stood up. Mom said my name, her voice full of that practiced calm she uses when she wants me to do something I don't want to do, but I didn't answer. I picked up my purse, walked out into the cold night, and kept walking until their voices faded behind me. They didn't follow. They didn't even come to the door. It was like I had already become invisible. I spent most of that night pacing around my apartment with the city lights flickering through the windows, too restless to sit and too angry to cry. It was as if every memory I had ever buried started pushing its way to the surface. I thought about the countless times I had rearranged my life to make theirs easier, and the vacations I canceled to babysit, the weekends I gave up so they could get a break, the way I had taken extra shifts in college to help pay for things they wanted. It was like seeing the pattern of my whole life for the first time. All those years of being the dependable one, the one who would say yes, because saying no had never seemed like an option. And sitting there on my couch, I realized it had never been about love or gratitude. It had been about convenience. Somewhere along the way, I had become something less than a sister, and more like a safety net they expected to be there whenever they needed to fall back. By the time the sun came up and the streets below started humming with traffic, I had decided to try one last time to make this right without tearing everything apart. I called Mom first, keeping my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I told her I wanted to be part of the trip, to celebrate with them, but that I had an idea. I would pay for a professional babysitter to come along and take care of the kids so that I could be with everyone. There was a pause on the line, and for a moment I thought she might consider it, but then her voice turned cold in a way that made my chest ache. She said it wasn't an option, that she wouldn't trust a stranger with her grandchildren, and that the whole plan depended on me. Before I could say anything else, she hung up. A few minutes later, Jessica called, her voice sharp, accusing me of trying to ruin everything. She said they had worked hard to make the trip special, that everyone was counting on me, and that now I was being selfish because I wanted to change the plan. Molly followed, her tone quieter but no less insistent, reminding me of every little favor she had ever done for me, as if watering my plants once or picking up a package canceled out years of sacrifice. The calls didn't stop there. They came in waves, one after another, turning from pleading to demanding to furious. By the time my phone finally went silent, I was sitting on the floor with it in my lap, my heart pounding, feeling like I had just gone 12 rounds in a fight I hadn't agreed to enter. All of them said the same thing in different ways, that I owed them, that family means giving until there is nothing left, that I should stop thinking about myself. But what none of them seemed willing to see was that I had been thinking about them my entire life. And for the first time, I started to wonder what it would feel like to think about myself instead. When the apartment finally went quiet and my phone stopped lighting up, I sat there with my back against the wall and realized I could see everything clearly for the first time. It wasn't about Mom's birthday, not really. It wasn't even about the trip. It was about years of them deciding that my life, my time, my money existed to make their lives easier. Every word from those calls echoed in my head like a script they had rehearsed together. How I was selfish, how I owed them, how this was just one small thing after all they had done for me. And as I listened, really listened, I heard what they were actually saying, that they believed I would always fold, that no matter how unfair the demand, I would show up. For the first time, something in me refused. It was like a switch flipped. All the guilt I had been carrying for years dissolved, replaced with a clarity that felt almost like relief. I got up from the floor, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my laptop. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew that I couldn't stay trapped in this cycle. My hands moved almost on their own, typing in flights, hotels, Florida beaches. I found a place that was everything the mountains weren't: warm, open, with soft sand and blue water as far as you could see. It wasn't extravagant, just a quiet hotel right by the ocean with balconies that looked out at the horizon. I booked a room for the exact week they would be in Colorado. Then I picked a flight, a direct one that would take me straight into the sunlight. When I hit confirm, a strange calm came over me, the kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't rebellion, it was choosing myself. Maybe for the first time. Over the next few days, I stayed silent while they kept calling and texting, letting their messages pile up unanswered. I packed slowly, folding light clothes into a small suitcase, feeling the weight of everything I had decided not to carry anymore. No ski gear, no kids' toys, no list of activities to keep them entertained. Just swimsuits, books, and the thought of the ocean. On the morning of my flight, I set my phone to silent and placed it in my bag. As the plane lifted off the runway and the city fell away beneath me, I felt something loosen inside, like I had been holding my breath for a decade and was finally letting it out. By the time we broke through the clouds, I wasn't thinking about the house in Colorado or the angry voices waiting for me there. I was thinking about how the air would feel when I stepped out into the Florida sun and how for once in my life, the only person I needed to take care of was me. Florida was everything I hoped it would be. When I stepped out of the airport, the warm air wrapped around me like a blanket, the scent of salt and sunscreen so different from the cold city I had left behind. I took a cab straight to the hotel, a modest building with balconies that faced the ocean. And when I opened the door to my room, I could hear the waves even before I saw them. That first afternoon, I walked barefoot on the beach until my feet sank into the soft, wet sand and the water lapped at my ankles. There was no sound but the sea and the gulls overhead. I let the sun settle on my skin, let the tension drain out of my shoulders, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I did absolutely nothing. Each day melted into the next like that. Sleeping in, reading by the pool, watching the sky turn gold at sunset from the balcony with a glass of wine in my hand. It felt almost like living someone else's life, one where no one expected anything from me. It was only near the end of the trip that I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications that didn't stop scrolling for minutes. Voicemails, text messages, missed calls. The first ones were confused. "Where are you? We're outside your house." Then they became impatient. "This isn't funny, Claire. Open the door. We're late." And then the anger came. Jessica's voice on the voicemail was high and sharp, accusing me of ruining everything, of abandoning them. Molly's messages were longer, full of disappointment and guilt, saying I had let the whole family down. Even my mother had left messages, each one colder than the last, telling me that she didn't recognize the person I had become. I imagined them all standing outside my empty apartment with 5 restless children, their plans collapsing around them. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I let the phone buzz itself silent and walked back outside to the water, leaving all of it behind me for a little while longer. When I finally returned to Chicago, I barely had time to unpack before the pounding started on my front door. I had forgotten that years ago, I'd given Mom an emergency key, and before I could even react, the lock turned and they came inside like a storm. Mom first, her face tight with anger. Jessica and Molly right behind her. Voices already rising, they crowded into my living room, demanding to know how I could do this, shouting over each other about ruined birthdays and wasted money, and all the ways I had betrayed them. I stood there, still tanned from the Florida sun, letting their words crash over me like another wave. But instead of folding like I always had, I felt something hard and steady inside me. I didn't shout back, I didn't apologize, I just let them talk. And I waited for the moment when the noise finally burned itself out. I let the shouting die down before I spoke. When the room finally went quiet, I told them no. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady in a way I had never been before. I said no to the idea that my life existed to serve theirs. No to the endless guilt they had been pressing on me since the night of that dinner. No to the expectation that love meant erasing myself. They tried to interrupt, but I kept going, telling them everything I had carried silently for years. How every vacation, every free weekend, every bit of extra income I had ever had went into holding their world together while they barely noticed mine. I told them I was done being the person who always said yes. Jessica's face went red. Molly started crying, and Mom just stared at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. It didn't matter. The words were for me, not for them. There was a long silence after that, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. Then Mom said something cold, something about how, if I chose to walk away from this family, I shouldn't expect to be welcome back. It should have hurt. A year ago, it would have. But standing there in my own living room, with the Florida sand still clinging to my shoes, and their anger still hanging in the air like smoke, I realized that what she was saying was already true. I had been excluded for years, just in a quieter way, so I told her that if walking away was what it took to have a life of my own, I would take that step. They left in a storm of slammed doors and angry muttering, and for a long time, I stood there alone, staring at the door, waiting for the guilt to come rushing back like it always did. It never did. What came instead was a feeling so strange, I barely recognized it at first. Peace. In the weeks that followed, the silence was loud at first. I kept waiting for the phone to ring, for someone to try to pull me back into the old patterns. They never did. I started filling the space with things I hadn't made time for in years. I joined a book club. I started walking home from work, instead of staying late just to avoid going back to an empty apartment. I planned another trip, this time to Europe, and booked it without asking anyone's permission or checking anyone's calendar. There were moments when I missed the kids, but not the way they had been used as leverage against me. One night, I opened the family group chat, scrolled through the endless stream of demands and guilt that had filled it, and quietly left. No announcement, no goodbye, just one small, final act of letting go. The next morning, when I woke up, I realized that for the first time in my life, there was no part of me waiting for their approval. For the first time, I was free.